All right, guys, welcome to another CyberSec Tuesday. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us, and those that are watching us later on YouTube. For those that are new, we meet up every Tuesday night on Discord. Then we post most videos onto YouTube afterwards. For those that are tuning in from YouTube, feel free to subscribe and click that bell icon. Great, a little goes a long way, so greatly appreciate it. Before we kick things off, I do want to do a shout out to our sponsor, ArcLight 6. They are a consulting and engineering firm specializing in cybersecurity, networking, and software engineering. I got more information on the screen. You can check them out over at arclight6.com. Today, though, we have Cyclops on here, going to be doing a talk on browser extension security, discussing some of his research on that and things to look out for. So, yeah, Cyclops, take it away.
You for the intro, Sinak. Yeah, so as Sinak mentioned, today we're going to be talking about pretty big supply chain threat, in my opinion, which is just the general security and monitoring of browser extensions that you install in your various web browsers. So I'll go ahead and get started. Just for background, by day, I do cybersecurity engineering, and yeah, this kind of came up recently at work in terms of monitoring and doing some risk reviews. So I thought I'd share some of my findings and the tools that I've been using. Yeah, just start off with why extensions in general matter is that 80% of enterprise work happens in the browser, is browser based. So it's a pretty significant attack surface, and a lot of important information is traveling through everyone's browsers. So um, in general, we want to make sure that the things that we're installing to those browsers are secure as well. And there's lots of extensions on the Chrome Web Store. Not all of them are necessarily vetted and verified, and you do have to kind of go through some processes and declare some things. But there's definitely some potential for malicious things to be installed. A recent incident that happened was the Cyberhaven supply chain incident, which was actually a security extension that was compromised. One of the developers who had access to be able to post new versions of the extension, he had his credentials compromised, and the attackers were able to push out a malicious version of the extension to about 2.6 million users. And additionally, other extensions were compromised in similar kind of worm-like campaigns. So this is a significant supply chain threat. And like I mentioned, this is kind of that attack vector visualized here is that the developer account would be compromised, and then a malicious update is published, which is basically auto updated to everyone who has the extension installed, and then everyone is compromised from there. So there's not necessarily a user notification for when a extension updates. There is a permission reprompt if a permission changes, but this is somewhat of a new feature in a lot of browsers. Um, and then, yeah, developer account takeover is basically the main attack vector here in terms of an extension being compromised and then that being pushed out to many different users. So that in that Cyberhaven campaign, there were many other additional extensions that were compromised. Um, the mitigation to something like this would basically to maintain a verified, approved inventory of extensions, and then to review that regularly and re-verify when extensions receive significant updates. So just generally, I'll go over how browser extensions work and kind of try to describe some of the differences between what's called the manifest version 2 and manifest version 3 extensions. You might have heard some things in the news about those recently. Generally, most extensions nowadays are manifest version 3, but there are still potentially some artifacts of manifest v2 extensions that can be left in users' environments. Um, so one of the main differences between manifest v3 and manifest v2 is that manifest v v2 basically had a persistent kind of page that was always happening in the background, whereas manifest v3 has a service worker, which is more event driven. Um, just in general, yeah, like the browser has to declare a lot of the permissions and sites that it'll be reaching out to in what's called the manifest JSON, which is something that you can download basically directly from the CRX file or when you decompose that kind of thing. So ultimately, everything that the permission or that the extension is doing, and all the permissions that it has, and all the URLs that it can access, as well as the scripts it has, that's all kind of like defined in the manifest .json file. Uh, yeah, that's pretty much it here. In general, this is just a bigger breakdown of the manifest file. It has to define the permissions that it uh, is requesting, such as like if it wants access to your cookies or if it wants the ability to do scripting or basically view the page that you're looking at, it'll have to define all of those in the two different permissions categories, as well as it will also have to define any content scripts and web accessible resources such as like HTML, CSS, JS. Everything has to be defined in the manifest JSON file that the extension can access. And this has also improved in Manifest v2 versus v3. Manifest v2 didn't have a separation between just permissions and host permissions, so that kind of gave more granularity between that. And additionally, this declarative net request was Manifest v3 replacement for just web request blocking, which was sig- a pretty significant threat. And yeah, I think that's it here. Yeah, like I said too, in the background, the Manifest v2 extensions had persistent background usage, and they were basically always running in the background of your browser, whereas the Manifest v3 are more event driven and are dependent on like the kinds of interactions that the user has with the browser. So some of the more critical permissions would include things like access to cookies, the ability to make web requests, things like accessing the debugger. This one is particularly dangerous too because you can run scripts once you have access to something like the debugger. Um, all URLs. This is one of the most dangerous permissions and kind of gives the the extension the ability to view and modify the content on any given page. So yeah, these are kind of some scoring methodologies. This was actually taken from a previous tool, which is no longer it doesn't exist anymore. But this is kind of like the points that they assigned to these various different permissions. Um, but I'll kind of go into some of those other tools that have rated these different permissions with similar point levels. And yeah, some of the more critical ones, like I mentioned, are cookies, debugger, web requests, and all URLs. And these are particularly dangerous is because it has read and write access to your cookies. So that would allow you the ability to maybe potentially reuse that cookie somewhere else if that extension had been compromised. So basically replaying the session that you're currently using is a significant threat, as well as the debugger. Like I mentioned, you have basically the ability to evaluate arbitrary JavaScript, which means that you have remote code execution, and you can also intercept all of the network traffic. You can do a successful man-in-the-middle attack via that, and you can navigate all of the tabs via the different functions that you're given in the debugger. So this one is highly permissive. Web request and declarative web request, you can inspect basically all of the HTTP requests, and you can have some kinds of write access into that as well. All URLs, this kind of gives you a script injection and man in the middle capabilities across pages that users access. It's basically when you have this kind of like permission level, you can rewrite what a user is able to see. So if a user thinks they're seeing a login screen to Google, you could kind of project your own Google login screen. So this is another highly permissive one to look out for. These are the different high risk permissions, and I also have a slide for medium risk. I won't go into each of these in depth, but some of the ones to call out would be clipboard read, because this can basically give you access to see what kind of passwords or tokens the user is copying. Tabs, you can exfiltrate someone's history and see the kind of different sites that they've been visiting. um, Desktop capture. This is a significant one as well, and in some cases it's necessary for the function of the extension. For example, like a RDP client that's via a Chrome extension or something like that, or maybe it needs to take a screenshot of the page that you're looking at. So there are valid use cases for all of these different kinds of permissions, but if in the wrong hands, they can be used for the wrong purposes as well. Um, Keep going through this. One to call out here in the medium risk permissions would be management. So this gives you basically the ability to manage other extensions. So that one is something to call out is if you have, for example, a VPN or antivirus extension installed or deployed to your different machines, give another extension with this management permission would have the ability to disable that kind of extension. Um, yeah, there's all all different kinds of reasons as to why these would be needed for various extensions. They could be managing your things like your bookmarks and your downloads. Um, but like I said, if in the wrong hands, they can be abused as well. So this is a kind of just an overview of how extensions generally are weaponized. Like I mentioned, you can hijack cookies, passwords, tokens, and this is case in point with the Cyberhaven incident. That developer's session was hijacked, and they were then pushed out a malicious extension, which kind of then compromised other extensions, and it was just a chain reaction. So uh, credential theft can have a pretty big impact there. Uh, Surveillance. This is a big data exfiltration, threat. We wouldn't want basically an attacker to be, monitoring the different tabs or resources that you're seeing. Ultimately, the if a browser extension has even kind of something like that medium or high permission of desktop capture, then they would have the ability to capture information potentially about internal systems. So big threat there. Just in general, command and control, remote code execution via eval. This was more of a threat with manifest v2. In manifest v3, you can't just evaluate arbitrary JavaScript from the web. You have to declare all of the JavaScript that you're going to execute within the Chrome extension files themselves. So that is one significant upgrade of V2 versus V3. Yeah, just in general, supply chain attacks can be a big threat here. Is like we saw with the Cyberhaven incident, it can kind of have a chain reaction. And yeah, just in general, we wouldn't want like attackers to be able to manipulate users' browsers, such as like proxying all of the traffic to a different location or kind of yeah redirecting users to sites where they would be giving up their credentials elsewhere. Any questions so far?
Uh, I was going to ask, is this so far is most of this information specific to just Chrome, or is it with Firefox as well?
Yeah, great question. This I mainly stuck to Chrome in terms of the permissions list, but a lot of these are similar across browsers. Obviously, especially across Edge, they have it's almost basically identical in terms of the permissions. But yeah, Firefox is similar. They would probably have you know arguably somewhat better security. Just guessing. I don't know like off the top of my head, but with Chrome was the main focus for me in this because Chrome is, deployed for the enterprise. So that was, and a lot of the other kind of permissions are based around the work that Chrome has done in the past. But I did use this permissions list source or like from Chrome as kind of just my general guidance initially because Firefox isn't deployed in the enterprise.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Cool.
But I would assume that or Firefox rather, sorry, has a similar list of permissions that are like this, that are kind of ranked. That is one struggle too, is that some of the tooling is obviously not consistent between the different browsers, and it's kind of hard to find one that works for everything because they format the files differently and the store page and everything as well. But I'll get to some of that in a little bit. Any other questions? Cool. I'll move on. Yeah, so I've mentioned this a few times now. This was kind of just the most significant recent event was the Cyberhaven supply chain attack where, a developer account was compromised similar to, a lot of the NPM attacks that we've been seeing, and this malicious extension update was pushed to a lot of different users. Um, Ultimately, there's been other recent campaigns which are similar. This Dark Spectre sleeper campaign was basically sitting for a little while, and ultimately they it had passed a check a long time ago, and later in time it was reactivated. So there is always that kind of threat as well. Additionally, ChatGPT for Google was a recent compromised thread, but this kind of also shows that ChatGPT and AI-based services are a big draw for users to install those kinds of extensions. So there's going to be more malicious activity happening in that area that's also trying to steal your cookies and trying to steal your sessions to those various tools. So those kinds of things are definitely something to look out for from an enterprise management perspective as well. Um, and yeah, this was another one of those ones that was kind of like a sleeper tool that was a long running attack. This kind of also just shows that like the longevity. If an extension has been around for a while, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's trustworthy, especially because these things are JavaScript based uh, tools mostly. It would be highly recommended that you're looking for things that have been recently updated. It would be kind of worrisome if an extension hasn't been updated in more than a year or two, for example. And now kind of get into some of the tools that I generally used to evaluate the various extensions and kind of just their permission levels and all of that. So the main tool that I based my project off of, oops, sorry, back up here, was this CRX analyzer tool from Riley Dakota, which is basically a GitHub repository that contains a Python tool, which ultimately downloads the CRX file from the Chrome store and kind of breaks down things like the manifest.json and other things about the extension to kind of get a little bit more information about what the extension does, what permissions it has, and it also gives its own permissions score, But in my opinion, the permission score that it gave wasn't the best because it ultimately kind of like capped out at 100 points, and there were just a lot of things that I didn't really like about this tool. Unfortunately, it was very helpful, like it's an initial starting point, but there were some other things to be desired, such as there was not necessarily any like static analysis of the code as well. You couldn't really upload things in batches of CSVs or things like that. And additionally, one last thing is the information from the Chrome store was somewhat helpful to me in terms of kind of gauging when when a extension has been updated and how many users it has and how many, if the developer is verified, all of those things that you would get from like the Chrome web store. So in the tool that I wrote, it kind of tries to add a little bit of that while using some of the the work that was already done in terms of like analyzing the manifest and doing some of the permission scoring. But I ultimately kind of created my own grading system that was separate from the grading system that this provided. There are other online tools which are similar. Last week we sent this link in the chat too. Is this extension security.io? Last week it was broken, but it's working again now too. So if you want to try it out, you can always go to this extension security.io and paste in the little uh, the Chrome extension ID. Just show that real quick if I can. But ultimately, that will give you a similar kind of grade, and it will tell you all of the URLs that extension is able to reach out to. And to Synac's point, this tool was one of the only tools that I could find in terms of just like a free online tool that supported all three browsers. So it has support for Chrome, Edge, and Firefox, which is helpful. Not all of the tools that I list here are like that. So just continuing. Yeah, this unfortunately doesn't have like a bulk API that you're able to upload to, but they have a very similar risk scoring methodology to the Riley Dakota and some of the previous CRX tools that came before it. This fourth tool right here, I found this one yesterday. I didn't know that this one existed. I wish I had more time to check it out, but I wanted to call it out because it seems pretty helpful. It's called EXT Sentry Guard, and it also has a GitHub r- repository. I apologize, I didn't put the link in here, but when I send out the slides, I'll put that there. Ultimately, this is there's a few things with this. There's a Chrome extension that you can deploy on your own machine that kind of does like some real-time blocking or alerting in terms of the user to see like, hey, is this a known malicious extension, things along those lines. And they also have things like a SIM feed. Unfortunately, I really wish I had more time to check this out or dive deeper, but yeah, like I said, I found this one yesterday, and it is a relatively new project. And one other thing to call out is that there was tooling around this previously, but some of those kind of projects have been depreciated. Like this CRX analyzer is also a bit out of date. So there's definitely some room in this space to develop some new tools. And like this new tool that just popped up yesterday, I was kind of hoping to build something that eventually could, like monitor in real time in the browser that different potentially malicious actions that an extension would be doing in real time. So it's good to see that people are working on that kind of stuff. There's another tool out there very similar to the extension security.io called CR Explorer. This one only supports Chrome, unfortunately, but they do have a very nice UI and like permissions breakdown. it'll give you a very similar permissions score and everything to this extension security.io. The one thing that is nice about this one is that you can kind of script it a little bit better because you can put the extension ID in the URL and you can kind of like automatically scrape things. So that's something you can't actually do on the extension security.io. Just something to call out there real quick. But yeah, and then the last tool that I used in terms of what I implemented on top of the CRX analyzer tool was just using semgrep for code analysis. And this is just a free and open source static analysis tool that you can use to kind of evaluate given set of JavaScript or HTML files, which is ultimately what a Chrome extension breaks down into. Any questions on any of these tools?
For the one that can run in the browser, does it so do you install that first and then install other extensions and it gives you kind of a report of them?
Ye- So yeah, I actually I wish I knew more. I would assume so on this one, and to be honest, I would be kind of going against my own advice in terms of like don't install extensions from untrusted developers with this since it's so recent. But no, I think that it's a cool project. Definitely check it out. I link it a little bit later in my slides as well. Uh, yeah, right here. This is the GitHub repo and their website. They have some good resources on there though for sure. Like it seems like a pretty cool up and coming project that I'd like to become more familiar with in the near term. But just quickly, I can show you their. Uh, I think they have it. Yeah, right here. It's Chrome extension. It's called uh, ext Sentry Guard. But ultimately, yeah, you would install this, and I assume that it would tell you when a Chrome extension that it detects from its threat feed is installed on your machine, or give you a report of all that kind of stuff, like similar things here. So, um, yeah. Uh, Yeah, I think that's all I had. The EXT Sentry Guard, I'll do a little bit more deep dive into that too in the next couple slides. Try and speed up on time here. Uh, in general, yeah, there the telemetry sources that you have in terms of like enterprise threat hunting, you would obviously want to use any Chrome enterprise browser telemetry that you're receiving. Uh, I unfortunately don't work with this, so I can't speak specifically to how you'd be able to manage that. But if you are managing your browser in that sense, then definitely keep an eye on like the policies that you're deploying. Obviously, um, the browser extension control is deployed through like it's deployed at scale through like a GPO kind of setup usually. So that would be something to keep an eye out for, is to make sure that your GPOs are deployed correctly. But outside of that, the other place that you would be receiving telemetry might be from like your EDR provider for CrowdStrike, or Microsoft Defender, for example, as well as potentially you would be able to get some of this kind of information from your mobile device manager, such as Intune or Jamf. Something to look out for is if extensions have that all URLs permission. You might want to look out for if an extension is coming from like a certain country. You might want to look out for if the semgrep errors are significant, or if the extension hasn't been updated within the past 30 days, or something similar to that. But in terms of just threat feeds, like I said, this ext sentry tool, I found this yesterday, provides their threat feed that you can kind of point your SIM at, and they host a bunch of malicious extension IDs. So this could be a helpful source for pointing your SIM at. And then Atomic Red Team also has some resources on this as well that I thought I'd call out. So I linked all those in the presentation here as well. But they have a lot of good stuff on GitHub. So, like I mentioned, the extension policies are ultimately deployed through a GPO or some kind of equivalent policy in your MDM or device manager, and ultimately it'll be called extension install allow list. Uh, this previously was called extension install whitelist, but it's been changed. So definitely be careful. Check your GPOs to make sure that this has been updated. Um, and yeah, ultimately you would want to maintain a list of extensions that you're allowing and then basically block everything else. Similarly, there's an extension install block list, uh, GPO or similar policy that you would deploy at scale. And ultimately, you would want to block all extensions with a wildcard parameter. Um, in terms of a governance process, ideally you would want a request or a ticket to be opened and a risk review to be conducted on a given extension before it can be kind of added to that allow list. And you would want to use, different kinds of signals. You would want to use, for example, the kind of report which is formatted in the way that you want, plus maybe the score from extensionsecurity.io or a similar tool. Um, and ultimately, you'd want to maintain your approved list in some kind of source control so that you can see how that changes over time and yeah, determine your cadence for re-reviewing um, basically your extension footprint and also the extensions that you have installed or that you've permitted. Some just general things to call out. Obviously, I've mentioned it a few times now. Is this all URLs or combined with cookies or debugger? Uh, those are all highly permissive things in the browser. So definitely look out for extensions that have those and maybe don't need those. Um, in the code analysis, in terms of the things that you would see maybe in your SAST analysis, you would want to look for obfuscated JavaScript, maybe hex or base 10 encoding, um, and yeah, basically, if there was some dynamic script loading from external URLs, this would be ultimately pre-manifest v3 because in manifest v3 you can't just execute arbitrary JS from the web anymore. But ultimately, if users out there still have a v2 extension installed, then that's the kind of thing that you would want to look out for. Uh, semgrep, yeah, semgrep findings, all that kind of stuff. Just definitely pay attention. Um, in terms of, yeah, you might want to see like if there's extensions that are coming from maybe a country that your enterprise determines is higher risk than others. There are different ways that you can kind of get some location information from the developer, whether it's posted on the Chrome Web Store or ultimately just doing like a DNS lookup of their website. There's different ways to kind of get some information on where they're from, but you might want to compile a list of different countries that are acceptable and maybe not acceptable, as well as taking other signals from the store, such as like if the developer is verified, um, that can be helpful, or if they sometimes Chrome projects ultimately like if an extension um, has like a good reputation, things along those lines. Um, the high risk extension types, in my opinion, that I have kind of seen out in the wild are in general the AI productivity sidebars and like the different AI extensions in the browsers. Those are, you know, new and up and coming, and ultimately they have a lot of permissions, and they're a lot of users want to have this kind of resource in the browser. Um, VPNs and proxies are popular. Cryptocurrency, maybe some coupon tools are also very common. Another one to look out for, definitely in terms of just general hygiene for your enterprise, is remote access tools. And then the last is you might want to look out for ad blockers, because this is like a pretty common use case, and you want to check like who the developer who's distributing that is, because ultimately those tend to be pretty highly permissive. All of these different types here are typically have pretty bad permission scores. So yeah, this I just added a quick blurb on this ext sentry guard. Ultimately, it 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 has a web feed for, your sim that you can plug in, and then they have some good resources on GitHub as well. It's a pretty recent project, and I think that this kind of stuff is popping up because there's a little bit of a lack of just open source tooling in the space. So it's good to see that. Um, yeah, you would just want to ultimately kind of review all the installed extensions that you have at scale in your enterprise, in terms of checking on general use, on like a securing your user environments, uninstall things that aren't actively used, look up the extensions on a various tool extension security, or if you find one that you like more, use that. And take signals from the store. Is the developer verified? Have you heard of the company? Are they real? Do you do business with them? uh, Basically question if an extension is requiring all the permissions that it's projecting. um, Make sure your browsers are updated and your GPOs are deployed correctly. Potentially, you might want to install some kind of uh, ext sentry guard or a similar, real-time detection in the browser itself. I know there are different EDR providers that are looking to do things that are similar to that. So yeah, and then you might want to set some kind of cadence to review this regularly. So in terms of extension development, I won't go too deep into this because I don't know how much of you guys are developing extensions, but I mean, obviously this kind of goes in general. But you want to make sure that your extension has the least amount of permissions that it can. You don't want to, obviously have the all URLs permission when you don't need it. Um, no remote code. This is explicitly banned in MV3. You can't host or you can't execute arbitrary JS from the web. Um, so that's a significant improvement. Uh, yeah, you want to make sure that your dependencies that are in your project are obviously up to date, and tools like the extension security.io, they help you kind of keep track of those various dependencies and all the websites that those URLs have the permission to reach out to. So yeah, you want to ultimately kind of check on, hey, is this thing loading a lot of arbitrary JS files, or is it loading a lot of arbitrary URLs that it doesn't need to be talking to? Those are the kinds of things to look out for and maintain in terms of your own hygiene when you're developing. Um, yeah, and last is the developer account security. Is yeah, make sure that your cookies and your sessions are safe. Use hardware MFA and not SMS if you can, in terms of authenticating, because that kind of you know uh, cyber haven incident can have a significant blast radius and can in turn compromise a lot of other extensions. So yeah, keep going. This goes over a little bit more of the MV2 architecture. Like I mentioned, these different points. It had a persistent background page. You had pretty easy ability to do a remote code execution to just fetch an external JS script and evaluate it. Um, most uh, modern extensions have moved to MV3, but the MV2 extensions are still ultimately visible in a lot of EDR telemetry. Like you'll still be able to see if you run a report at scale. A lot of MV2 extensions still installed on users' machines. They may be stabled, but they can kind of still pop up as being installed. So you definitely want to just check on your general inventory of that. Um, yeah, MV3 is a significant upgrade over MV2 in terms of just general safety of the remote code execution stuff and also having that persistence in the background. This is the difference in MV3. It has more of an on-demand service worker, which makes persistence much harder. You can't just evaluate remote JS, all the JavaScript that you're evaluating has to be contained in the package. The permissions, it has a separate host permissions, um, basically category, and the content security policy enforcement is much stricter in Manifest v3. Um, Yeah, so like I said, just definitely build your inventory of what you have deployed out there. Kind of try and grade that on a different whatever scale you determine is necessary. Enrich with different signals from your various tools, like extensionsecurity.io was the main one that I used as my backup, and determine an outcome. Ultimately, it's like whether you're approving, blocking, or requiring justification for this kind of extension. You might need to reach out to those users. Um, yeah, detections, importing that ext IOC feed into your SIM would probably be helpful. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to play around with this myself, but I would like to. Um, in the browser, maybe monitoring unusual outbound requests would be something that this kind of tool would hopefully alert on in the future. That would be kind of cool to see. So. Um, Yeah, in terms of like governance, definitely like deploy your GPOs and policies, extension install block list and allow list, and maintain your approved extensions that you have. And then ideally, you want to have people open up requests before that kind of stuff is deployed at scale. Um, you might want to for highly permissive extensions, especially like the screen sharing kind of permission or extensions, that is something, if it requires new permissions, that might warrant, a re-review as well. Um, yeah, it's kind of a lot of the same here. Just figuring out ultimately what your cadence is going to be is important in terms of just general management as well. Um, and then you'd want to track if some kind of thing changes with your developer. Cyberhaven is a relatively trusted vendor, but that compromise changed some of that. So um, definitely be sure to keep up on what extensions out there are getting compromised and what's in the news. In terms of the future of browser extension security, is there's definitely going to be a lot more LLMs that are analyzing the code that's out there. So this is kind of a emerging threat, I would say, in terms of like all of the old extensions that are out there. People might find new ways to abuse them with especially with like AI agents that are active in the browser, taking advantage of other extensions and maybe the permissions that are allocated to those extensions. So something to look out for. In general, the AI is becoming more powerful in the browser anyways, becoming more integrated. So it'll have a lot more, you know, fingers into the different capabilities that your browser has in terms of being able to make web requests and access the extensions capabilities on your behalf and things like that. So I think that that's probably an emerging threat. Uh, in terms of supply chain, that's going to be a continued issue, just as it is for things like NPM. Um, yeah, the regulatory pressure. I would say that this last point is also pretty important. The different audit companies are going to have more strict compliance guidelines on what kind of extensions or controls that you have in your browser in terms of managing this. And a lot of the EDR providers are responding right now with giving you governance capabilities within the EDR tooling itself. Ultimately, a lot of this in the background is still just managed by GPOs, but it's definitely an improvement, and it shows that um, EDR providers and regulators are definitely trying to get more of an inventory on this kind of thing and check if you have controls around this kind of stuff. Um, like I mentioned, yeah, the AI browser sidebars and just AI extensions in general usually have quite broad access. And I think that that definitely warrants a discussion around how much we should give them. Um, yeah, that's kind of all I had on here. Uh, Key takeaways. Yeah, supply chain attacks are kind of one of the biggest threats here. Session hijacking can happen. Through various things like cookie stealing, AI, conversational credential harvesting extensions. There are sleeper extensions which can go silent for years and then ultimately kind of reactivate later or have a malicious update which is pushed to them in the future. Just want to look out for if developer accounts are compromised and the blast radius that that has to other extensions. It doesn't just apply to Chrome. It's like it's all these different places where we're downloading arbitrary code and having it run in the background. Uh, the best detection is or the best way to kind of mitigate some of this is obviously first build your inventory of what do you have out there. Um, Alert on things like if it has all URLs or if it has debugger. You might want to take those extensions with a little bit more granularity. Um, you'd potentially want to, correlate with outbound connections, uh, like maybe a set of IPs that you would never want to be accessing. You would say like, hey, alert on this kind of outbound connection. Ideally, I would like to see kind of some of that tooling implemented into this EXT Sentry native Chrome extension. That would be kind of cool, but uh, something to do in the future for sure. Um, yeah, as well as just like monitoring, yeah, your browser telemetry for any update events, like if the extension is asking for new permissions, things along those lines. Um, for in terms of the enterprise, have a extension install block list that's set to block everything and only allow the things that you have on your allow list. Run some kind of reporting mechanism monthly or however often you choose. And then if a extension changes its permission set, you might want to that might warrant a re-review of that kind of thing. Um, as background or like as an additional source, you might want to use extension security.io or an additional tool as kind of a second source. Don't always take what one tool has to say as like uh, the end all be all. Definitely double check in other places as well and see if other people have reached the same kind of determination. um, Ideally, you would want this kind of thing to be approved with, like a ticket-based or approval-based workflow, and then have those kind of determinations and approvals be documented. Um, yeah, and in terms of just general developer hygiene, it's like hard hardware MFA is the strongest, but MFA in general is great to have in terms of the logins, especially if you have access to highly sensitive packages that are deployed out to many other developers. This is a list of the tools and resources that kind of just used in the project. Some of the incident reports of the things that I mentioned. Um, this will all be attached in the presentation, but that's all I got. Thank you guys. Any questions?
No, really good talk, man. Lots of questions, but I'll wait for us to cut the stream and continue the conversation. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I will.